Ladies and gentlemen, after a brief hiatus, our host extraordinaire is back. History's Darkest Chronicles, with your host, Alan G.
Hello everyone and welcome to History's Dark Chronicles. I'm Alan G and I will be your host. If you like what you see, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll be notified of any future episodes. In the annals of crime history, the Whitechapel murder case still resounds with accusations of who may or may have been the elusive killer. Some believe that after two more murders in London's East End, one of Alice Claypipe Mackenzie and the Pinchin Street torso murder, that the unapprehendable Jack the Ripper may have died or escaped to another area of the globe to indulge his debauched, murderous fantasies. Some scholars believe that he made his way to the United States and began a reign of terror here. Although there are some instances where the Ripper may have made his entrance into American crime history, due to time and the inevitability of destroyed or missing historical documentation, historians, detectives, criminologists, and crime buffs alike believe that the murders that paralyzed the whole nation in 1888 were about to begin on American soil. The cases we'll be reviewing in this episode that stand for the historical records are tacit, if not weak proof, that the most wanted killer in English history did, in fact, make his way to the New World. After you watch, you be the judge. According to a reliable source, a 60-year-old prostitute nicknamed Old Shakespeare and a man who signed the register C. Nick checked into the East River Hotel at 11 p.m. on April 23, 1891, and took room 31. The prostitute may have requested that particular room as she stayed in it a week earlier. Eddie Harrington was a clerk at the seedy abode, and he went to room 31 to empty it out as it was his duty to do so. The hotel was all but vacant at 9 a.m. when he lightly tapped on the door. After repeated louder knocks on the door, Harrington used his master key to unlock it. Upon opening the door, Harrington's eyes had to focus through the dimly lit room, and he discovered the mutilated remains of a woman on the bed. He caught himself breathless and went for the authorities. Police identified the murdered woman as Carrie Brown, who was described as a desolate woman of 60. She was a former actress who was nicknamed Old Shakespeare because she would quote the famous playwright when drunk. An acquaintance of Brown named Mary Ann Lopez stated that a man known as Frenchie was often seen in the area. The man was later identified as Amir Ben Ali, who supposedly fit the description of the man who checked into the hotel with Brown on the night of her murder. The police rounded up Ali for questioning. Brown and Ali knew each other, and some prostitutes said that the two had actually shared the murder room a week earlier. Although noticeably older than the known Ripper victims, she was a prostitute and may have been intoxicated, as had nearly all of the London East End victims had been. Also, Mary Kelly was noticeably younger than the average Whitechapel murder victim. Nothing of what has been written about Brown can disprove she was a Ripper victim, but we are provided very little information about the woman, and none of this proves that Jack the Ripper killed either. The murder site is of interest, as it was both a hotel and a saloon. Located on the corner of Catherine Slip and Water Streets, the East River Hotel was known as a bawdy resort. Such a location offered both advantages and disadvantages for a would-be murderer. The hotel provided both easily available victims and a place for privacy. On the other hand, the murderer would be seen and possibly be identified by the hotel regulars. In fact, they, along with the clerk, could provide a good description of the man who checked in with Brown. The murderer faced another problem, in that he would provide a sample of his handwriting by signing the register book. The man who checked in with Brown signed the register C. Nick. This man may have murdered Brown, but if he did, he took many risks. If C. Nick killed Carrie Brown, he was not Jack the Ripper. It's not known if the East End had similar facilities, but if so, it is irrelevant because the Ripper seems to have picked his victims from off the street. This is in keeping with the behavior of what we call today the organized sexual serial killer. He does not want attention drawn to himself. In London, the Ripper may have met some of his victims in public places. But if he did not accost them until they had left the pubs, probably at different times. When the clerk went to kick out Brown, most of the hotel was already vacant. Perhaps the killer knew when the clerk would come around in the morning and could have planned his crime accordingly. When the police arrived, they were accompanied by members of the press and the coroner, who immediately took charge of the body. The next day, April 25th, some New York newspapers printed headlines that read, "Jack the Ripper had arrived in this city to carry on his gruesome deeds." Some papers carried stories that the Ripper had come as a direct challenge against Chief Inspector Thomas Burns, who had said that a series of murders like those committed in Whitechapel could not happen in his city, and if such a murder occurred, the miscreant would be in the jug within 36 hours after murdering his victim. On April 25th, the police had an official suspect, one Amir Ben Ali, known as Frenchie. The moniker given to Ali stemmed from his first language, as he was from French Algeria and spoke the language fluently, claiming he could not speak English. The following day, newspapers carried police statements stating that Ali was probably implicated for being a cousin of the murderer. On April 29th, the newspapers were stating that the police still had no idea of whom the killer was. At or around this time, a detective Kilcawley from Jersey City contacted the New York Police Department that a train conductor was positive that the murderer had been on his train and had been taken to the town of Easton. No further information was provided. Why the conductor and later the detective suspected Brown's murderer of being on a train to Easton is not known. If so, could it have been Frenchie, C. Nick, or a totally different suspect? On April 30th, 1891, Chief Inspector Burns told some reporters that he now believed Ali had murdered Brown and that he had a complete case against him. Ali, known as Frenchie I to distinguish him from the others using that nickname, was arraigned before Judge Martin and officially booked for murder. On the following day, Ali was moved to the Tombs. Because he could not afford one, Ali was given the court-appointed counsel of Levi, House, and Friend. On the night of the murder, police surmised that Frenchie was not C. Nick, the man who had checked into the hotel with Carrie. They stated that he not only stayed at the same hotel that night, he was in room 33 directly across the hall from Brown's. Their scenario was that Ali entered Brown's room sometime after C. Nick had left. He then murdered, robbed, and returned to his own room after killing and mutilating Brown's body. The trial was a short one. It had begun on June 24, 1891, with another Algerian Frenchman from Ali's home village acting as an interpreter before Recorder Smythe. Initially, Assistant District Attorneys Wellman and Sims represented the state, and also Burns and 4 other police officers. On July 1st, District Attorney Nickel himself took charge of the case, and it was he who brought in Dr. Foreman as an expert for the defense. This is somewhat surprising since the defense began its argument the following day, July 2nd. The prosecution called various witnesses who painted Ali as having led a sordid life, who often stayed at the East River Hotel and was known to wander from room to room at night. Ali had a criminal record. He had served time in the Queens County Jail during March and April of that year for vagrancy. David Galloway and Edward Smith were serving time in the jail while Ali was there, and testified that Frenchie had a knife like the one found at the Brown crime scene. The evidence presented by the prosecution was a trail of blood droplets that led from room 31, Brown's, and room 33, Ali's. There was also blood on both sides of the door leading into Ali's room, a chair in that room, and on the bed tick. There were no sheets on the bed and on the blanket. Burns believed that the bloodstains found on both sides of the door indicated that someone had pushed the door open with bloody fingers and then closed it from the other side. The chief inspector also said blood was found on Ali's socks and under his fingernail scrapings. A Dr. Foreman was the prosecution's main expert on the evidence. He stated that all the blood samples that he had examined, all from the places listed above, contained food elements, which indicated they came from Carrie Brown's abdominal wounds. Two other doctors, Austin Flint and Cyrus Edson, corroborated Foreman's testimony. The rest of the evidence against Ali included a tallow candle that had been burned for more than an hour in Ali's room, showing that he was waiting for some reason, and that he had been seen slinking out of the hotel in a guilty manner at around 5 that morning. As for the knife, Constable James R. Hilland testified that Ali had no knife when he was arrested in Queens County, thereby refuting Galloway's and Smith's testimony that Ali had such a knife in jail. Other medical experts believed that the substances found in the blood samples did not mean that they all came from the intestinal wounds, but did agree that Foreman was at the top of his class in his profession and that they had the highest regard for his work. The explanation of how blood came to be on Ali's socks and under his fingernails was proven to be false. The verdict was something of a surprise for the prosecution and police when it was handed down on July 10th and it sent Ali to Sing Sing prison for life. The defense team did a good job in that Ali was convicted of second-degree murder rather than murder in the first degree. Actually, Ali may have been acquitted had he not taken the stand himself. He performed poorly. Although a translator was called to help with the questioning, it appeared that he did understand English perfectly well sometimes, and was repeatedly tangled up on cross-examination. When asked whether he murdered Carrie Brown, Ali jumped to his feet even before the translation was completed to him and screamed,
"I am innocent! I am innocent! Allah, Allah! I am innocent! Allah Akbar! I am innocent! Oh Allah, help me! Allah save me! I implore Allah to help me!"
Soon after being sent to Sing Sing, Ali was transferred to a hospital for the criminally insane at Mattawan. While he was going through all this, work was being done to get him free. Some journalists who had assigned to follow the case from the beginning, such as Jacob A. Reese and Charles Edward Russell, began to investigate on their own, as they were convinced that the truth had not been uncovered and would never be until the mysterious C. Nick was tracked down and interviewed. The police do not seem to have tried to find this important suspect, which seems strange as no one had been charged for the murder of Brown for more than 5 days. Governor Benjamin Odell pardoned Ali after receiving new evidence recently discovered. There were persistent rumors from seafaring men that the murderer had quietly gone to sea. Such rumors were never proved. It was established that a man resembling C. Nick had been working on a farm in Cranford, New Jersey, several weeks before the Brown murder. He was not in Cranford on the night of the murder and vanished entirely several days later. Found in this man's room after his departure was a blood-stained shirt and a brass key with 31 on it that matched the set of keys used at the East River Hotel. The key to room 31 was missing, presumed to have been taken by her killer after leaving the body. There was no evidence that linked Ali with the missing key. Odell received several affidavits from disinterested people whom the governor described as, quote, persons of credit, some of whom had experience in the investigation of crime, end quote. These credible witnesses claimed to have been at the crime scene before the coroner had arrived and said there had been no blood in the hallway between rooms 31 and 33, nor on the outside doors of either room. These witnesses implied the bloodstains, which were found by the police the day after the murder, were probably the results of removing the body by the coroner and the journalists that were there when Brown's body had been examined and then removed. Police testimony records clearly state that there had been no blood on the doorknob or lock of room 31. This was important because the police scenario was that the killer had used the key to unlock, open, then relock the door after killing Carrie Brown. With all of this new evidence, Odell pardoned Ali and the French government provided transportation for him back to his native village in Algeria. With the one suspect convicted of the murder and then released due to evidence that he could not have committed this most heinous crime, authorities still sought to close the case. Their efforts proved for naught, as the Carrie Brown murder remains unsolved. On the evening of March 19, 1915, at approximately 7:30 p.m., a woman sent her young daughter from their tenement to retrieve a pail of milk. At approximately 7:45 p.m., a neighbor of the little girl, Augusta Johnson, thought she heard whimpering from outside of their door. Once Johnson opened the door, she noticed 5-year-old Lenore Cohn laying at her doorstep covered in blood and moaning in pain. An ambulance came immediately to the scene and brought the young girl to a local hospital, but she expired on the way there. Some police officers who made it to the tenement immediately after Lenore had been evacuated saw that the little girl had a clump of gray hair within her left hand. They also noticed that Lenore had bruise marks on her neck that indicated the perpetrator had a very large hand. Police initiated a search of the building and discovered blood droplets on the opposite side of the tenement, but they were unable to determine whether they were old or from the present case. They immediately determined that little Lenore had met with foul play. The coroner noted that little Lenore had fingerprints on her face and throat. She had been sucking on a piece of lemon candy at the time of the attack. Authorities believe that the assailant strangled until rendering her unconscious, then stabbed her, then mutilating her body. After inquiries by authorities to several stores in the area, they determined that the killer may have given her candy as an enticement. Upwards of 15 detectives had been assigned the case and kept a close watch on the neighborhood, hoping that the killer may make a return to the crime scene. Soon after Lenore's murder, Mrs. Cohn, still grieving at the death of her daughter, received a letter signed H.B. Richmond, Jack the Ripper. In this letter, dated April 30th, 1915, the author claimed that,
"Dear Miss Cohn, just a line to let you know that the person that is accused of writing letters to you, and as I said before, a man that keeps his ears and eyes open and mouth shut will always get along and never get caught."
Inside the first envelope, there appeared a second, which contained the following letter, which read,
"Why don't you drop this case? You know that man can't get me in 100 years from now, so it's no use in searching for me. I'm a wise guy, you know, but wise guys never get caught. You may think that I'm a fool to write you, but I'm writing just to show you I ain't afraid. Mr. Richmond is innocent of the letter which you accuse him of writing to Miss Cohn. I'm the one that wrote all of them. As I told you in one of my letters, that is going to be the biggest murders to be committed in New York that was ever known. Now do you see I'm true?"
H.B. Richmond happened to be a convict awaiting trial on some misdemeanors who thought he could gain a little notoriety. After careful investigation, police discounted the demented man as a suspect and determined he would not be responsible for the murder of Lenore Cohn. Local newspapers reported that a letter claiming to be from the murderer stated that within 3 days of the postmark, he would murder another child. The letter had been dated April 30th, 1915. The killer kept his promise when on May 3rd, the family of Charles Murray had wondered where the young boy had gone when at 7:30 p.m. that evening, after a careful search of the building where he and his family lived at 270 First Avenue, family members discovered his badly beaten and disemboweled body under a dimly lit stairwell within the building. According to reports, a 6-year-old girl had been attacked prior to the attack on little Charles. Witnesses stated they viewed the little girl playing outside of a bakery, waiting for her aunt to purchase some goods. A well-dressed man with a mustache and a black derby tried to speak to the little girl. When she refused, he grabbed her arm and forced her through an open doorway. Neighbors of the bakery, hearing the little girl's screams, chased the man away. It turned out that newspapers reported several attacks on young girls on the east side of New York. Of course, when there is a great fear of a monstrous killer hunting children, the fear tends to turn into hysteria. One newspaper reported,
"Today, thousands of mothers are keeping their little ones with them indoors, fearing that the Ripper will go on another rampage."
On May 6, 1915, Mrs. Murray, Charles Murray's mother, received a letter from someone claiming to be the killer where he or she stated that he will commit another murder when the present excitement over her child's death subsides. Another letter was sent to the mother of Charles Murray after her son's murder. As she read it in the kitchen next to her friends, she collapsed in the chair. The note read,
"I feel sorry for you. I sit in my room here in this neighborhood and watch this crowd of police looking for me. But when the excitement cools off again, some evening after dinner, I am going to kill again. While I feel sorry for you, you must understand that I must see blood and cut flesh. The police can never get me. RFC."
Investigators noted that the author of the most recent correspondence used pencil instead of pen ink. Drawing this distinction, however, did not bring the case to a resolution. On May 7, 1915, a young boy claimed to have been stabbed in the thigh by someone he called Jack the Ripper. An excited crowd chased a man that the young boy identified as his assailant, and the man had to be rescued by police. Another incident, some 10 days later, brought a similar result. The hysteria surrounding the murders brought out jokesters looking to create more worry and chaos just for the fun of it. Mothers worried about their children soon received handwritten notes in pencil underneath their doormats, where children were threatened to be kidnapped and murdered. The police traced the notes to two girls who wrote them just for fun. On May 10, 1915, based upon a report that two children had been murdered at public school number 83 on Long Island, a massive crowd of employees from a local Tabasco sauce company marched to the school in solidarity. The mob demanded that the children be assembled outside of the school so that the mothers could retrieve their children. None of the children were missing. The resulting rumors spread amongst the local school districts, panicking mothers to schools to retrieve their children. None were harmed. On May 13, 1915, a local tailor named Frank Fusia had been arrested by police and held in connection with the superficial attack on Helen Manning, aged 14, in the hallway of her home. Fusia claimed to have been at church during the attack and claimed that members of the church to which he belonged could vouch for his whereabouts. On June 23, 1915, Philadelphia police arrested a man named George Blumlein in connection with the murders of Lenore Cohn and Charles Murray. Alienists at the time examined Blumlein and determined that he suffered from hallucinations and that he also suffered from a persecution complex. Subsequently, due to a lack of evidence and the suspect's mental state, police doubted that Blumlein was the murderer. Despite several disappointing leads, the murder cases of Lenore Cohn and Charles Murray remain unsolved to this day. The cases of Carrie Brown, Lenore Cohn, and Charles Murray leave more questions than answers. If we examine the cases in depth, we learn that perhaps one of them may have been the work of the infamous killer. Hysteria played a large part in labeling these murders the work of the psychosexual maniac of the autumn of 1888. As an historian, author, and educator, I stumble across cases that must be investigated further so that they will not falsely fall into the category of Ripper murders. Every year, works published claim to know who the elusive killer may be. Because of a lack of documentation as a result of the passing of history, it will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to positively identify the fiend known as Jack the Ripper. Of course, we all have our own theories, and we base these on information, discussions, documentation, programs such as this, and of course, rumor and innuendo. It is fun and enlightening to try and discern who this historical killer may be. But until solid, irrefutable evidence emerges, we are all just speculating. If you liked what you see, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll be notified of any future episodes. Also, if you'd care to contribute to the channel, we have a PayPal account and we have Buy Me a Cup of Coffee. Until next time.